Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 96 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we've had some really big news within the Lorcana community. Hiram and Fortisphere have been banned. This is going to be a huge impact on the evolving metagame for the rest of Set 7 leading into Set 8. So yeah, on the podcast, you're kind of going to get our first impressions, our first thoughts on these bans, what it means for the meta. We're then going to be talking about some new deck lists that we would like to suggest to you guys if you're feeling a little bit lost, like, oh my god, these cards are banned, I don't really know what to play right now. We're here to offer some suggestions of new decks that you could try out, and we'll discuss them in depth. The other thing to speak about is Steve Warner went on to the Discord yesterday after the announcement, and he did like a few different kind of Q&As to kind of help give some explanation, some reasoning as to why they made the decision to ban these specific cards. So before we jump into it, I do want to highlight a big thing that I think a lot of the community have been talking about since they announced the banning of Hiram and Fortisphere. And it's addressing discard decks in particular, the discard strategy. We all know what happened with Bucky. Discard can seem like a very unfun type of thing within card games, which, you know, it prevents your opponent from playing the game most of the time. I say this as an avid Amber Emerald fan. I really enjoy the deck, but I think it's really important to highlight this archetype. And yeah, I was really curious to see what the Lorcana team's, you know, mindset was around this archetype. But luckily, Steve has kind of cleared this up for us. So this is from Steve within the Discord. He says, "We plan on being very cautious with discard as an archetype. Discard is a mechanic in card games that should exist, but within reason and to a limit where the game remains fun." So for any of you out there that are calling for Diablo bans, Prince John bans, you know what? I don't blame you guys. I don't blame you guys from like having this initial panic and saying, oh, this discard strategy could like have this new surge, you could take over. But I do have a lot of faith within the Lorcana team at the moment that if these strategies do take over, we will see them take some action on it. Moyen, curious to hear your thoughts on the whole thing, right? Maybe just your initial thoughts on this kind of discard discussion, and then we'll lead into the broader discussion of like Hiram and Fortisphere getting banned.
Yeah, I mean, I think discard is fine to have in the meta. I just want to be able to play some of my cards. And the card draw tools get a little bit more limited now that blue doesn't really have the greatest card draw anymore. But like in general, I think that would be fine, because while they're discarding you can also maybe set up your own board and stuff. But the combination with Diablo makes it like a really frustrating experience. It's like if you don't like yes, Diablo is removable, but if you don't, you're like not really in a game. And then the Prince John also really has a lot of very limited outs. And so I don't love playing against the current versions of discard decks or playing them myself. But I'm sure we'll find a way. I think they're somewhat kept in check by Amber Steel as well, because Amber Steel can just remove the Diablo threats and out-tempo the slower discard plan. So I think that is... I don't love Amber Steel either, but I'm happy it exists so that maybe discard gets kept in check a little bit.
Yeah, I do think I agree with you for the most part. I think that Amber Steel probably has the tools to combat this the most. Even for stuff like a whole new world against like more of a combo discard deck like Amber Emerald, right, where their out is, okay, sure, they can establish the board, but if I get to the key door under the sea, I'm kind of back into the game. If the whole new world is like, you know, if there's an aerial on board and the whole new world is top decked, I've said this for a long time, that's like one of the moments I despise the most when it happens, because it feels really but it's the same thing. It happens in any card game, is top decks, you know, but like this type of strategy of like a whole new world can be used as this kind of this disruption tool, that could keep some of these discard strategies in check potentially. But yeah, it's mainly the Diablo, and mainly the like you said, Diablo has its it can be removed and stuff. Prince John is very uninteractable. And like I say, I play a lot of Prince John, I play a lot of these discard decks, but my fear is I also don't want to be in this meta where it's discard decks versus discard decks, because that is a very unfun meta, in my opinion. Yeah. I think having everything balanced is makes it way more interesting when you're playing discard decks, because it's a certain strategy you have. When it goes to like these mirror matches, I personally really don't enjoy it.
Yeah, and on top of that, Amber Emerald usually gets the short end of the stick against Emerald Steel discard, so I'm sure you don't want that meta.
I really don't. Yeah. So yeah, we're gonna jump into it. First, we do have our spilled ink section, though. This is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below. So yeah, last week we asked for like some kind of card idea submissions, which I thought would be cool to discuss. And then after this, of course, we'll lead into discussing the ban a little bit more. But the first comment is actually from two people. It's from Joshua and from CT Ignacio. They say, Kawa, make a lemon lime guide. I suggested like, oh, maybe if people want to have like a discard guide, I can do it. But I was like, maybe people don't want to play the deck that much. In my opinion, and you're going to hear myself and Moyen say this a little bit later on in the episode, I think Amber Emerald has gotten a lot better, post ban, and the cards haven't really changed. It's pretty much the same deck. So if you guys want that, that's something I could potentially write up. I'd be happy to, and it would be it would go in depth and talk about the different matchups and stuff like that. But again, let us know down below if you really want it. I'll consider doing it. But yeah, moving into one of the first submissions that we have here, Moyen. This is from Ben Larkin. They say, this is their new card type submission for the Spilling section, stolen directly from Gwent. Gwent, for those of you who don't know, is another card game that is like takes place within the Witcher universe, but it was a digital card game. So the card is called Storybook. The card acts like a location and has willpower, but there is a story on the card which gives various benefits to the player as the chapter progress conditions are met. So this would be a 3-cost inkable, 13 willpower storybook with 2 lore, which I'm guessing that works the same as at the start of the turn you gain the 2 lore the way the locations were. It says once per turn, whenever you play an ally, move forward 1 chapter. Whenever either player gains a lore, decrease this card's willpower by 1. Okay, first of all, I think the biggest thing, I think they say this as well, I don't know where you'd fit all of this onto a card initially. Like from a game design perspective, this is a lot of text, right? And how you would kind of write this on the card. But the idea is, it's like chapter 1, all allies you control gain evasive. Chapter 2, exert an ally you control to banish chosen opposing character with strength equal to or less than that ally's strength, I guess. And then you could draw a card. But this general idea of like once a condition is met, you kind of move forward with it. So I mentioned this to you earlier, Moyen. This to me seems similar to like a card type I'm familiar with within Magic, right? I think, is it? I have no idea what the card's called in Magic or the type of card.
Oh, I don't know them off the top of my head either, but there's like these layout cards that have either you pay extra to move on to the next stage, or at the start of your upkeep you move on to the next stage of those cards, and that I mean they're generally interesting. I do say, yeah, usually they have so much text that there isn't a lot of space left for art.
Sure.
But when you minimize the art a little bit, you can kind of fit it onto a card.
Sure, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I think the biggest thing for me would be like, as you move through these chapters, are the previous conditions kept, or are the previous conditions replaced by new, better conditions, basically?
Yeah. Also, what I like about it is it seems like it fits thematically very well to Lorcana, to have like a storybook kind of thing that progresses as you reach a goal or something.
Yeah. No, it's definitely a cool idea for sure. The next comment is, they just say, is from Christopher. Can someone tell me when Brendan is back? So yeah, Brendan, like he's mentioned before, right? Like time zones are tough. What I will say is, for the next like 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip to Japan, to Tokyo for a little bit. So it will probably be yourself and Brendan, Moyen and Brendan taking over the podcast for a little bit. So Brendan will be back in full force. And you'll have his reaction to these bans as well, of course, next week as well. So don't you worry, we'll give you guys some Brendan as soon as possible. This one was interesting. The next comment is from IBG Music. They say, I want to see cards that can give something illusion for a turn. So I looked at this 2 ways. I was like, okay, first of all, sure, if you say there was a card that made one of your opponent's cards an illusion until the start of the next turn, so that it can be easily removed, that sounds cool. Or I also like the idea of the reverse where like you play a card and it has, when it's an illusion, right, it has like the vanish keyword, but it only had the vanish keyword until the start of your next turn. So like for the moment when you played it, it's at its most vulnerable, and then if it sticks, then it survives a little bit longer. So I think there's like so many cool ways of like, we take what's already an existing mechanic and then we kind of add a little bit more spice to it. So what are your thoughts on this, right? I don't know if this is the exact way to do it, but it's cool.
Yeah, no, so like having temporary illusion or like giving something illusion to get rid of it. I mean that could work for sure. It's not like anything groundbreaking, but it could. I mean, I like that it works off something that we already have.
The next one is from Keen, who myself and Moyen know. He says, "What's up, lads? Hope you're doing well. How can I play Ruby Amethyst in this meta? How would you guys build it? I will never give up my baby. I do think with the results the red blue is getting, it becomes more viable." So just for context, like this comment was posted last week, right? So yeah. I mean, we have a Ruby Amethyst deck that we're going to be discussing, so we'll probably wait until we get to that section to discuss, how can you play Ruby Amethyst in this meta. I think with the removal of Hiram and Fortisphere and Blue Steel maybe going a little bit lower, maybe we can see Ruby Amethyst resurge a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think they will definitely be back. I think, but the only thing is that's difficult is building Ruby Amethyst always needs a lot of knowledge about the exact matchups and the meta.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a little bit up in the air right now. But no matter what the meta will be like now, I think the meta will be better for Ruby Amethyst than it was before. I think it was really, really struggling against Sapphire Steel. And so like it might take a route that wants to outgrind maybe the red-blue builds that might stick around and play like rabbits and bounce and Tremaines, but also I think what's might be more likely is that Emerald Steel and Amber Steel, like heavy decks that get a lot of tempo early and have the discard tools, become very prominent, and then against those decks maybe we need both a few Diablo answers, but also like very much high tempo cards, so you don't fall behind too much before the whole new world is sung onto the board.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. The next one's also from Keen. He put in a card submission. So he said the card name would be Dipped Quill. It would cost 2. Hasn't said if it's inkable or uninkable. And the item would be a tool. So the description is pay 1 to attach this tool to a character. Characters attached with this tool gain +1 lore. So simple tools, attachments, equipments, upgrades, like mentioned in the video previously, are quite normal across a lot of TCGs, even Yu-Gi-Oh! Back in the day. Tools can only be attached to one character at a time. So I think the example of, attached characters attached to this tool gain 1 lore, maybe that effect and the cost and everything is a little bit irrelevant. It's the idea of like upgrades or enchantments, within previous card games. I think they could definitely work in Lorcana. Where I'd find it interesting is then as soon as you print these types of cards, like with any type of card within Lorcana, right? Like you want to say, okay, you then need to print cards that can answer those cards. So the way you've got like item removal, location removal, how do cards like this interact with like bounce mechanics? If something had a tool or an upgrade on it, a character had a tool or an upgrade on it, when the card was bounced, would the upgrade just go to the discard pile? Would it be bounced back to the hand? I know that's resolved in a few different types of ways within card games I play. So the ideas of these cards are cool. And like a particular one that would be really powerful is like, let's say you give it like an upgrade that it gives the character ward as well, which means like it's really uninteractable, or the upgrade itself has ward and the character doesn't have ward, right? Like there's loads of different things you could do there. But my worry is, this is what I've seen from other card games as well, is when you print cards like this, and let's say a bounce card, for example, you'll put an upgrade something and then your opponent bounces it. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 in a sense, that like you're committing so much to making a card so large, but then if it gets bounced or removed, then you've kind of wasted a card on a card. But there's ways to design that and stuff to get around it. The interesting thing would be though, in Lorcana in particular, it's really cool because in other card games, usually they'd always just buff the stats of the card, so the strength and the willpower, because the objective in many other card games is to damage your opponent directly. But in this game, it's like, no, the idea would be maybe to slightly alter the stats of the card, but the main focus is maybe increasing the lore on the card, right? You know what I mean? Because that ends the game quicker. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I think like it could also just add some keywords to cards or just very common effects that we already have, like when you banish character in a challenge, do X, or ready this character can challenge again, or something. I think there's a lot of design space in that, and what I really like about it as well is like the name for it just works perfectly, right? Okay, so it's a tool, so it's still a subtype to an item, so it can still be banished by item removal. But
sure.
But it's a tool that the characters are using. It's not like it's not a weapon or anything. It's this Disney Lorcana, but I think tool works really well.
Yeah, I think the flavor is spot on there for sure. Then the next question is from Lyndon Williamson. And this leads into basically the bans and stuff like that. They commented very, very shortly after the ban was announced. They say, question for you guys regarding the Hiram and Fortisphere bans. Do you think this was the best way to hit Sapphire with a ban? I personally felt like there were much more elegant solutions to the meta problems. It feels a bit ham-handed to ban Sapphire's entire draw engine. I didn't feel Hiram was overwhelming up until the support Sapphire got in set 7. Would a Bell ban have been more reasonable? Maybe Scrooge. I know Moyen thinks the Scrooges are particularly strong. What would you guys have done? I have some thoughts, but I'm going to let you start off, Moyen, for your initial thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a very, very good question. And it's not never easy to say, okay, what's best for the game? What will the meta develop like, depending on what change we would do? But there's a lot of things I agree, which is, yes, Flaversham was a crazy card since it was released, but it was kind of like, as we progressed through the sets, it kept getting more and more of a fair card because also decks got faster and it was much harder for decks to take a turn off developing this card draw engine. And then when they exerted to draw more, that they had to spend another ink, and then you have this 1/6 that they can trade into really well. There was some decks that dealt with it really well. For example, Ruby decks could brawl it to deny the draw before it gets going. Some like the best thing some red decks would do, or even purple decks would do, is just ignore it, let it exert once, and then like do a high tempo play, and then just contest it once it's exerted. And I do think it's gotten so much more problematic this set, because suddenly that was really, really hard to do, because it's not just the Flaversham that comes down on any turn and then you can just develop a board. No, it's like a turn 1 Bell that can sing Stormrage on, which is incredibly broken. Then there's Ramp on 2, which is also far too strong in this game. And then suddenly you're already contesting the board, and it's much easier to protect your Flaversham. You can use your Flaversham to sing like Zeus or Strength. And then at that point, it would really pile up and become problematic. So I personally think, design-wise, like Bell in conjunction with Stormrage on is like a very big thing. And Flaversham, yes, I think Flaversham was still overstated, right? And maybe its effect was doing a little bit more than it had to, but it just felt like a weird time where Flaversham was kind of in an okay position over the last 1-2 sets. And then this set, we printed some new stuff was printed, and suddenly the Flaversham became so much more of a problem, but kind of because of the new stuff that was printed. Yeah, but I'm not sure how often. Like I don't know if it would be a great sign to like print a card and immediately ban it. So I'm not sure if they really would want to ban something like Bell or Tamatoa
and it's
immediately.
In the starter decks and stuff like that. Yeah, and again, like I don't think for the most part that's gonna affect the decision. Like if something is incredibly broken, like I think knowing Ravensburger, like they'll put their foot down and they'll make the change. But yeah, I think all the points that you made are extremely fair. And I know a lot of people have been asking the question of, you know, why was Fortisphere banned and why was Popsicle not banned? And yeah, I mean, I have my thoughts again, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. You'll probably be able to educate people a lot better than myself.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, okay, so there's two sides of the story. One is, I love Fortisphere and I'm super sad it's gone. I think it was like a very, very fun card. And then it enabled some fun things, and then also like the occasional knowing when to banish it for one to set up an item turn, but also when to banish it to actually use the bodyguard and make the turn awkward for your opponent. I loved Fortisphere. So that's the one side of the story. The other one is though, I think banning Popsicle is like a completely ridiculous idea. I think Popsicle is the foundation for so many other cards that were printed. For example, there's Nick Wild that literally says return a Popsicle. And that's okay. So that's the most egregious example where banning Popsicle would have so many knock-on effects. But outside of that, there's also so much item support printed in Sapphire that like once you remove Popsicle, suddenly so many cards just don't make sense anymore because without Popsicle they don't work. And yes, okay, with cards like Flava Charm, Tamatoa, like the cards that use your items the best, Popsicle looks like a really, really good card. But which it is, but I don't think it's reasonable at all to want to take Popsicle away. And then with Fortisphere, I am sad. I think it was nice that, like, for example, I like the dynamic between Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire Steel, where Ruby Sapphire's big advantage was you're ramping into more powerful stuff. You're ramping into this big Sisu, into the Mawis, the Demigod and Half Shark. Is it Demigod?
Yeah. Hero to all. Okay. Hero to all. Yeah.
Hero to all. Yes, Hero to all and Half Shark. So I liked, and that was the advantage of Ruby Sapphire, and Sapphire Steel had the advantage of, okay, the stuff that I'm getting into is less powerful than what you are doing, but my upside is I have some steel removal, but also I have like more items, and I will hit my item enablers more consistently. So there's a lot of stuff that, of course, I loved about these decks and the dynamics between them. Of course, I do agree with the overall Sapphire decks being overtuned in total in the set. But it was like a lot of cards that played a role in that. For example, I think Flava Charm, if it only did on quest or it only did on play, or maybe it had like less willpower and you could easier take it out as soon as it exerts, or maybe damage-based removal could then be a way to take it out, like a Strength or a Zeus. I think that card would still be important for Sapphire, and without being like ridiculous. So in total, of course, I'm sad, but I guess I'll have to learn some other decks, and we'll have to adapt a little bit, which is not a problem. I'll be able to do it. It's just I enjoyed playing Sapphire a lot more as well than some of the other decks that I think might rise up, which we'll talk about later. So what do you think? What do you think about after my long monologue? What do you think about the bans?
I agree with you for the most part. Yeah, like I think that the Fortisphere ban makes a lot of sense, in particular because it's a way to combat that extra thing that you're mentioning that Sapphire got, which was the consistency of Bell within Sapphire Steel. And it's like a super strong one drop item within Steel that draws cards, which I know, again, I'm kind of paraphrasing from what Steve said as well for some of his reasoning, but like that's not really the identity of Steel. And I know like I like to see cards within colors that are like a little bit different, a little bit unusual, but yeah, like I played Sapphire Steel for a little bit, and I also did enjoy Fortisphere. So like as a card, how it was designed and stuff, it was like super cool. But I can understand the reasoning for taking it away. To your point about you know, if Hiram was, if it was just on play, if it was just on quest, if it drew one card instead of two cards, if it was a 1/5 instead of a 1/6, I think we could see things be very different if Lorcana was like a digital card game where you could basically errata a card or you know, OTA the card. And I think for the most part, you know, I think Bookie was probably I think they've actually said this, Bookie was the exception, not the rule. So I think moving forward, for things to just make more sense and things to be easier within like a physical trading card game space, bans probably make more sense in general moving forward than these erratas, because doing an errata, it's so much more challenging to then, you know, get these new versions sent over to people, and then okay, now that this new version is printed, you know, the fear of if you make a change, it was the whole conversation we had with Bookie, right? It's like the fear if you make one or two of these changes, but then the card is still busted, that makes the company look really, really bad. It makes it look like, do these guys even know what they're doing, right? So it's the idea of, okay, maybe hitting it on a few different axes to make sure it's not going to be as broken as it was. Still leave it playable, but then for the most part, it's kind of just unplayable now. Like, who's actually really going to play Bookie? So the idea of banning a card, it's just kind of simpler. I don't know if I've seen too much discussion of people saying, you know, oh, in the future, could we see these cards be taken off of the ban list? So maybe it's more like a suspension than a ban. For the moment, it's like a firm ban, right? But I know other card games like Yu-Gi-Oh! I've done this in the past where cards have been banned, and then, you know, who's to say that in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, maybe Hiram's needed in the meta again, right? Maybe Hiram and Fortisphere is needed in the meta again. Maybe other stuff's come along. Maybe Sapphire really needs access to more of that draw power, and Hiram comes back in. I would like to think that that's a possibility, but at the same time, I don't want to leave people's hopes of saying like, oh, they should just bring like Hiram back in. This will fix everything, right? But I just want to, yeah, like sharing my thoughts there on the difference between, oh, it could be so easy. Why don't they just change the stats or change this or change that for the errata? Like, of course they could, because they've done it with Bookie. But for me, at least, I saw how difficult it was when all of that type of stuff was going on. It was hard for me to get my new Bookie promos. Not that I wanted to use them again, but like I still wanted to have the card as a collector and stuff like that as well. So yeah, for all of those reasons, the ban over the errata makes sense to me. And yeah, for the just final thoughts on the, I haven't like spoken about the Hiram too much. Hiram, like, for the type of decks I play, yes, Hiram was a big piece that stopped a lot of my strategy, which was like, you know, that if I do the discard stuff, then they do Hiram, it's a little bit harder. But it felt, it to me, honestly, it felt like fine and it felt fair. It didn't feel fine or fair when they go like Hiram into Popskull, into Hiram into Popskull, into like, you know, do this. I do think that with the Bell edition, it was like particularly difficult if you're playing more of a tempo-based deck, board-based deck, where you want to try and get rid of it, but then they're just removing your stuff that you can actually get rid of the Hiram with. So yeah, I could see their decision, honestly, and I think it's going to have a huge impact. The other thing is, yeah, people, I want to ask your thoughts on this, Moyen. People say like, oh, why make these changes when there's nothing to compete for at the moment? What do you think? What do you think about that? I think that's just like keeping things safe and giving people a chance to figure out this new meta before there's then something to compete in, right?
Well, in the end part, yes. I guess that could be a factor when, I mean, I guess at some point we'll have Worlds. Probably you don't want to make the changes right before Worlds.
Sure.
But outside of that, I think if something is getting oppressive to a point where it's like limiting people having fun in this game, at that point it doesn't really matter if there's a DLC, right? That's happening at a local level, that's happening anywhere. And I think so. I don't think that change necessitates upcoming DLCs. I think there's a good reason to change it, even if there's no DLCs coming up.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. Yeah, so with that, again, that was the spilling section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to pop a comment down below. We are now going to move into some post-ban deck lists. So, Moyen, the first list we're going to take a look at is Ruby Sapphire. So what does Ruby Sapphire look like without Hiram Flaversham? Well, my initial thoughts on looking at this deck leads me to believe you've kind of explored the DKP route, seen how this deck has maybe evolved without Hiram. To me, this made the most sense, right? Because I know that's a deck that played like a lesser amount of Hirams anyway. So taking that package out completely, maybe this is a good place to start. What was your thoughts on this deck in general?
Yeah, well, this deck was like incredible last set, and then it was pretty bad this set, because it just didn't keep up with Blue Steel, and then also just got outvalued by them, and then the Sharks never stuck because of like Zeus and Strength. Like, I think it was pretty bad this set, but it was the Sapphire deck that was least reliant on Flaversham because it cared so much about tempo and setting up manas, making your opponent respond to you in that way, making them exert so you can Maui them. So in that regard, and then it can also use the popsicles really well still, even as a one-cost cycle that heals. And then but it still leaves a little bit of a hole in that, because without the card, like even if it wasn't as reliant on Flavasham, there's still a little bit of card advantage missing. That might mean you will have less cards in hand to play out your late game burn or story combo. But I think Tamatoa fills that hole relatively nicely as a card that can go +1 if you find 2 Popsicles before. If not, you can also just play the deck without it. I think Tala and Hofalgo are definitely staple 4s in that deck again. Because without Flavasham, that's even more important to just play cards that at least replace themselves. If you want to play somewhat of a mid to late game strategy.
100%, yeah. I do think looking at this deck in particular, like this was a version of Ruby Sapphire that I felt pretty comfortable playing into as a discard player. And I think with no Hirams, I feel very, very comfortable playing into this now. Because, yeah, like you said, like you're not going to have access to as many cards in hand. Although you do have access, in this deck, it has like Vision of the Future, Develop Your Brain to be able to fish for certain pieces that you need to deal with the board. I think with Maui Half Shark in this deck, like that's a card that's very difficult to deal with at times. Like if you're playing the Emerald Amber stuff, like you need Bruno, I'd probably have to put more Mother Knows Best back into the deck to deal with this. I think if you're playing Emerald Steel discard stuff, like you'll probably have to play some Zeus in order to remove the Half Shark, in addition to Bruno potentially. But besides that, yeah, I think the deck it's very similar to what it was. It has this new Tamatoa in there as well. And again, we've seen room for other cards to come in here, right? Like I know DKP was previously messing around with the Hades as well, right? So the idea of having that to sing the B prep with, that could be an addition if it needs to be able to clear some of these big threats. But overall, the deck is still extremely powerful. I'm curious to see... I'm honestly curious to see, will this find a place within the meta, or will it be pushed out by... I mean, I think it could potentially be pushed out by some discard strategies, but maybe not. Like, you're going to have to test it.
Yeah, it will very much depend on how much discard there will be, how much are they kept in check by Ember Steel. I don't think it's the worst matchup in the world, but this card could definitely keep this deck in check. And then there's 2 more thoughts when building this deck. One is Brawl. Could think Brawl gets worse because you don't have to hit Flavasham anymore. And in previous versions, there was also sometimes like being played a little bit less Brawl. I think I was playing 3 Brawl at the Südlo where I got second, I think. But the problem is, I think there will be more Diablos. So. And if you don't answer Diablo, you can very quickly lose off that. So that might still necessitate 4 Brawls. And then the other one was, now that Flavasham's gone, I was like, okay, what about the new set 7 4-drop Inkable that can give card advantage? So I tested that. I'm talking about the Kida that has 3/3 ward, quest for 1 on Exert. Look at the top 2, Ink 1, put the other one on top, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it's still too bad. So that was a little bit sad. I thought maybe now that Flavasham's gone, we can just play the new tool, the new Kida in town. But yeah, that's not the case.
Yeah, there's another interesting card to consider if you're playing Ruby, and there's a lot of these Diablos, and I think we're going to be talking about it moving forward in one of these deck lists. But it's the Pegasus Evasive, right? It's the 3/1. Like that's another tool that honestly, if Diablo really is everywhere, like you could pop that into the deck. And if it's not Emerald Steel, like if it's Emerald Amethyst or if it's Emerald Amber, then they can't really deal with that too easily. So that's an interesting consideration, which again, like I said, I'm sure we're going to talk about. Moving on to the next deck list. What do you know? The Pegasus is in here. It's Ruby Amethyst. So yeah, I mean, I've been looking on Twitter, boy, and I've been seeing everyone saying, Ruby Amethyst is back. We're here to stay again. So yeah, I mean, my initial impressions of this list, it looks very much like the standard Ruby Amethyst stuff. It still has the libraries in here, which I'm a big fan of. I think the Elsas being in here are very, very important against the Diablos. The Genie as well, it also really good against the Diablo, just like solid card. I think Ruby Amethyst could definitely be back. Like I think a version of this deck is just super solid again.
So this version is definitely teched to keep up tempo with Ember Steel, but also to be able to deal with Diablo. So it has the Pegasus that if it doesn't get stormed, can deal with it really well. Pegasus also works with library really well, and then you have 4 Balls, 2 Medusa, 2 Shift Zisus to deal with their boards. And then There's also a Queen of Hearts in here to be able to put up a little bit of a more resilient board early game against Ember Steel. At times, Counts of Discord, of course, could tweak, but still, this is not a normal Ruby Amethyst deck. There's no Mims or Rabbits in this, right?
Oh wow, yeah. I'm so used to just thinking like these cards are always in there. Yeah. Well, I think the Mim Snake is nothing new that we've seen that taken out, but I think like not seeing a Mim Fox is definitely
definitely
a decision.
It could definitely change. It's just kind of going. That's just really wanting to develop a board that goes ahead in tempo, and have more bodies on the board going to the library to really use that as your card draw engine. Whereas like BANS and Rabbit can be a little bit slow against Ember Steel, but I think there's like a lot of ways to build Ruby Amethyst, and the best ones will emerge as the meta progresses.
100%, yep. The next list we're going to take a look at is that Steel song that you mentioned. Honestly, I think we both kind of said this. We don't have the most experience playing Steel song, but I do think that this is going to be an important deck within the meta. As you mentioned earlier, Moyen, like this is a deck that could really keep these discard decks in check, right?
Mm-hmm. They're also that it's just a great deck with very high highs and very low lows. But this deck can also adapt really, really well. This is still playing the 4 Zeus 2 Kernel Mind, which might the count of might get lowered if there isn't as much targets for it. But I would still expect like an action heavy Shark, Tamatoa type, like the red blue version that we've showed earlier. That if against that type of build, this removable package is still great, and they can very, very quickly win board, out tempo you, and into a single hand refill and run away with the game.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's super strong deck, and one of the biggest additions that it got from set 7 is this Miss Bianca. Just like this 4-cost 5/5 basically, which is like a super tall body. That's going to be pretty difficult for your opponent to interact with for the most part. So yeah,
that and the Troubadour that kind of enables it.
100%. Yeah. Do you want to speak on the
very big hits?
Yeah. Do you want to speak on the Neverland maybe a little bit? Just the idea of why, like, you're thinking of kind of keeping that in the list.
Yeah. So I think before you should always play for Neverland before the ban. Now it definitely got a bit worse, because part of the reason why it's good is because you can kind of like the 4 willpower is really, really efficient against Ember Steel. But if it was just for that, it would still be worse than Nala, because it doesn't set up Rapunzel.
Mm-hmm.
But we still have a lot of ways to set up Rapunzel, and like diversifying your threats against B-Prep as opposing clears, which I think we should see more of again, will still be important. So I still can see Neverland staying in these lists.
100%. The next, this is, I looked at this list and I was just like, Moyen, what are you doing? What's going on here? So I'm gonna let you take the lead on this one. For all you Blurple fans out there, I remember the days on Podcana where Moyen's like, this ain't a real deck, this deck doesn't exist, and now he's here building it.
Yeah, it's like, maybe it's not real, but this is a new meta. I'm not opposed to trying things out in a new meta, and like it was really struggling against the Sapphire decks, and at least I felt that way. At least against the very strong Sapphire Steel decks. And I think it really didn't get hit at all. It was playing the Popsicle Bell package anyways, just because playing a 3/3 on 1 is so good for this deck, and you cannot... it's also the only way you don't get super out-tempoed by Ember Steel, and the follow-up with the Friends is super strong. And... yeah, I think this might be a decent meta. It's also like since Genie, the ramp into Genie Elsa, like Emerald Steel isn't the worst matchup. You can kind of get around to it. We can play a lot of card draw and the Finders Keepers. There's also, again, not playing Rabbit and BANS, because it's just worried that, I mean, even without Rabbit BANS, you draw a lot of cards and you don't really run out of stuff, and you need to be able to do faster plays than that to kind of survive against Ember Steel.
Mm-hmm.
I also really like the Wendy Darling enabling, in this mid-range type list, enabling like Diablo and Tipo to take meaningful trades. Crab does it a little bit better and faster, but Wendy on top of that is also just like a Ward 2 quester, an Inkville Ward 2 quester. So yeah, I think it's a list that I'll have to revisit and before and maybe at the end I'll call it bad again, but I think it has a shot.
I don't know, it's cool, like you said, yeah, it's a new meta, time to like do a little bit of innovation. I mean, again, as an Amber Emerald player, Blurple has been like potentially like my best matchup out of every deck in the game. I always feel super, super comfortable against this, but I mean, I think the Wendy Darling's a little bit more tricky for me to interact with, just because like warded characters in general. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the Blurple players will continue to develop the deck. Post, I mean, were Blurple, they weren't even playing Hiram before, were they? Or were they playing the Hiram package? They weren't really, I don't believe, right?
Yeah, historically, almost all Blurple versions were never really playing Hiram because it was just like they had access to the like faster draw, so they didn't really need to do the conditional slower draw with the Hiram.
100%.
Which to me is like, I mean, that's partly it's a little bit sad when you think about that Hiram still got banned. But it's okay. I'll get over it.
The next deck is Emerald Steel. I've seen a lot of people posting about like just Emerald Steel in general. Like, you know, it's potentially going to be like super, super powerful now because all of this discard stuff is just like really, really, really strong. You've got like super strong shift packages now. In addition, I mean, you already had like the Beast. You've got this big new Pete again, which this big Pete is something that's actually going to really help you out in the Amber Steel matchup, which Amber Steel could probably have a decent run against this deck, but I don't know. Like I'd be super interested to see Amber Steel versus this Emerald Steel run a couple of games back and forth and see what the outcome is, because I think it might surprise some folks. But overall, this is very much just what Emerald Steel has been doing for the most part. I think you can definitely tweak some numbers here and there. One thing I love in your version, Moyen, is the Cricky. I've actually been a big fan of like a 1 or 2 of Cricky with an Emerald Steel to be able to trade up with a lot of your stuff. Just a Cricky in general is just like a super, super solid card, right? Great on play effect, really good stats it leaves behind. A Singer in this deck as well, a Singer for Bruno, which is like super huge as well. But yeah, like I'd love to hear your like your thoughts on Emerald Steel in general, because in my opinion, I think this might be. I don't want to say this now, but I think so. I think this might be the best overall general discard deck going forward right now, because it has access to so many different types of tools. I don't think this is like the full-on discard your entire hand game plan that Amber Emerald can do with the You've Forgotten Me's, but I think this just like develops threats, discards cards, and it's gonna be super difficult to kind of get through, constantly trying to deal with the Diablos, constantly trying to deal with these big things like the Beast, the Pete, stuff like that.
Yeah, this deck kind of does it all, and I think it's probably the deck that improves the most with the bans.
Yep.
As outside of Flavasham, this deck can kind of deal with most other things very, very well. It can deal with early fast openings. It can put up some threats that are like very hard to interact with. It can run away with the game with Diablo, Prince John, and has on top of that has some great shift lines with the Beast, but also the new Pete, which might be another reason why World's Greatest Criminal Mind stays relevant in Amber Steel. And yeah, it can kind of do it all. And I'm a little bit scared of this deck in the meta, because even Amber Steel, which might be the deck that can like that you might think would do the best against this, I think even that is like pretty close matchup.
I agree, yeah. I like that, like you said, this deck has just so many axes that it's powerful on. Like the whole, like this deck having Ursula with the songs is just insane. Like Ursula's like always such a must answer when she comes down, or like, you know, you want to try check their hand, discard their stuff before they can play it. So there's so many different routes that this is powerful on. Like they have a good shift opener, they have a Diablo opener, they're starting to do Prince John, discard my cards. So yeah, this is a big threat, and for me as a discard player as well, I'm really terrified of this, because for the breakpoints against the other discard decks, the green-purple decks and the green-yellow decks, Pete is such a backbreaker when it comes down. So Pete, the small Pete and the big Pete for that matter, you know, you're not going to be able to sing any of your stuff. So yeah, I'm a little bit scared. That might lead me to make some changes to my deck slightly. But yeah, I would say prepare to see a lot more Emerald Steel. Emerald Steel, Ruby Amethyst, a lot of these decks that have kind of gone to the wayside a little bit. seem to be making their way back. We're going to move on to the next deck, which this isn't one that Moyen built, but it's one I wanted to bring up because I've seen a lot of people kind of on the list. Now, what I will say is this is a version, again, that it's been shown off and built with the Hiram and Fortisphere Sapphire Steel meta in mind. But it's the idea of this kind of green-purple discard deck. Discarding isn't its entire game plan, but it has a lot of similar elements to, I think, to Amber Emerald, in the sense that it plays like the Crickies to trade up with your small guys. You're playing this like super solid Diablo evasive, the Amethyst Emerald one, the 1/2 with evasive and Challenger +2. It's nearly like a better Sir Hiss in every way, besides the fact that it doesn't have that 3 strength against the Ruby decks. But I think this is like a super one of the best dueling cards, I think, in general, especially for this color combination. It just plays like the Genies, the Iagos. Like I'm kind of scared of this in a sense if I'm playing Amber Emerald as well, and it just has access to the kind of discard stuff. So I just wanted to highlight this deck because I think there's something that green purple could be cooking up. And it's not like, I also think that the previous versions of green purple that were in set 6, right, like the very heavy character focused ones, very tempo focused decks, they could see a bit of a resurgence as well. But yeah, what are your overall thoughts on a deck like this, Moyen?
Well, I think this deck was like pretty decent before the bans, but in part because it was the discard deck out of those 3 discard decks, Emerald Steel, Emerald, Amethyst, and Amber Emerald, that was best at closing out the game once they stuck like a Diablo, or maybe they discarded you a little bit. Like this deck would really end those games the quickest before maybe the Sapphire decks draw back into Hiram and start to stabilize a little bit. So I'm not like, why? So the deck was pretty good before. I don't know if it really benefits of the ban as much, because now that like I don't think it does too well against the other discard decks, against like Emerald Steel or Amber Steel. I could see the struggling. But I also wonder if you could build this with like the early Diablo opening and with the John discard package, but also with like Peter Pan plus Iago to have your Iagos rush into things. I think that could be a fun angle to look at.
That's interesting, yeah.
But yeah, I don't have much more to say about the deck.
I think it's interesting because I think against, like, I'll disagree with you slightly. I will agree that I think this is probably a little bit weak to Amber Steel, but I like the idea of this deck that it's like full of like these evasive threats. Like it's the deck that's playing the evasive package with the Diablo and the Prince John, the discard stuff, but then it also has answers like Genie and Elsa for like the other evasive stuff. So in that sense, like I think this could be okay against like dealing with other opposing Diablos and stuff like that. Depends how much of like removal it faces, especially like with the Iago being so fragile with the vanish keyword. But yeah, I'm interested to see how this deck will develop. It's also notable that this is the first Diablo deck that we've kind of seen that doesn't run the Cove package, right? This is just all in on just like killing Diablo, not running plain Coves, which I can kind of respect. And it's again, I just like to see differences. It's not like, oh, Cove is just like standard in every build. Sure, the Cove opener is powerful, but I don't think this deck necessarily needs it. So
yeah. I also know that one of the main selling points of this deck is like, okay, you have so many Diablo shift targets, but I still wonder, do you really need to play the full 4 dual color 2-cost Diablos? They seem a little bit underwhelming to me, so maybe you could cut them down a little bit. The problem is there isn't like a lot of alternative grade 2 drops in Emerald and Amethyst outside of Ursula. Sure.
Just play Sir Hiss instead. I don't know, like you could if you want to. Alright, next deck we're gonna take a look at is it's Amber Emerald. It's the deck we know and love. Well, I know and love. And Moyen sent me this list like yesterday. He asked me, unfortunately I was like traveling back from a tournament this weekend. I saw a message from him saying, send me like, you know, your current version of Amber Emerald or some of your best versions. And then he sent me, oh, this is the version I built. I was like, yeah, this is pretty much card for card my list. And I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming a lot of this was based off of our previous discussion with Bennett, right? Like his kind of test version. So to point out some differences and some flex spots that you could make to this deck, and it all kind of depends on the meta. Bennett has had a newer version of this list since he spoke to us last, and that included I think like 1 or 2 of Daisy Duck, which is the 4-cost Amber card. 2-3, when you play this character, your opponent discards a card. I think you can take like, 1 You've Forgotten Me out. I've toyed around with this idea, and I think it's okay, especially if you're against a lot of Emerald steals. It can kind of get around the Pete line, so they play Pete on 3 thinking they're going to stop your You've Forgotten Me, but you just establish this body as a 2-3. It's still going to make them discard a card. I think it's okay, but I think the power that You've Forgotten Me has makes me always nearly want to play 4 in this deck, because you want to make it as consistent as possible to kind of have that opener and to use this card as much as you can. Besides that, yeah, I think the Strike a Good Match and the number of Painting the Roses red is probably the flex slots you're looking at for songs. So like I mentioned, if you think that Maui Shark's coming back into the meta, I'd recommend playing probably just a 1 of Mother Knows Best, maybe 2 of. I think a 1 of is fine. It's just like an additional. We don't talk about Bruno. I'm going to ask you a question, Moyen, about like a potential song to include in this again, because this is a song I had back in Set 5, and I don't know, like I'm really trying to think, okay, do I ever put this song back into Amber Emerald, or is there just like too many other good alternatives? So You're Welcome. What do you think about You're Welcome in this in general, for the idea to, I don't know, like let's say it's a location meta. Do you think the idea is like, no, we just play more quickies, we just go full on the Sir Hiss, we don't really need to play You're Welcome? Because when I was using You're Welcome, the thing I was doing the most with it was like singing it on my own aerial to like give me more cards, and then like, or singing it on my muses to give me more cards, then bounce my aerial. So it didn't really seem like it was being used for the location or item removal. It was just like this weird kind of card draw engine, which Strike a Good Match is just better at, right?
Yeah, that's true. It's like, it's not that great at removal. It's not that great at singing use stuff. And it's not like, I feel like it's, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, right? But I don't think it's like that often that you have like infinite discard stuck in hand and your opponent's already out of cards. And if that happens and you have discards and they're out of hand, you're often like fine anyways, and you don't really need to like give them cards to immediately discard them again. So, and outside of that use case, just refilling the hand of the player that you were wanting to discard is like pretty big downside. So I don't really see You're Welcome going back.
Yeah, in that situation that you mentioned, yeah, like most of the time when they're on no cards, like if there are no cards and they're top decking each turn and you draw You've Forgotten Me, like it's just going straight in the inkwell. Like there's no reason to hold on to it, let me like use this combo, make them draw more cards, me get infinite value. No, like you're already winning the game. So yeah, like go ahead.
Just the other card that I was really interested in, but you didn't seem to like when I approached you about it, was the Tramp that was also in Bennett's recent as well. They were playing 2 daisies, and I guess in part because they like the daisy, but also it synergizes because then you have more bodies on the board for reducing the cost of Tramp to maybe filter for your pieces. So that, to me, that seemed like a really interesting idea, but I wonder why you weren't so into it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so into it because I feel like you need to have a lot of the... I mean, I can see the reasoning to put it in the deck because you've got a lot of these boarded characters. Like, characters will stick on your board for a little bit, but playing the Tramp down and then trying to fish for your stuff, okay, if I'm being honest, like I haven't tested it enough, but the idea of it to me, I don't know if I'm in love with it, because it means I'm taking out some of these other flex slots that I feel like are there for a reason, if that makes sense. Like, sure, playing the Tramp gets your other pieces a little bit more consistently, but I just don't think I'd change too much about this list in general right now. Like, if you wanted to try it, like my suggestion would be like, just like take out a Lucifer and put 1 Tramp in and see kind of how that felt, and then maybe put in the extra daisy instead of the You've Forgotten Me. But I just wouldn't go like too much into the package, because I've just really like this current shell that we're at. I think it's super consistent. I think maybe the Tramp is honestly a bit of a win more card. Again, I haven't tested it that much, but to me it seems like it might be a little bit of a win more. But then the idea of is like, once it comes down on the board, it's like this 7 cost 2/6. That's like a 2/6 is quite relevant. It's quite difficult for your opponent to interact with, unless they have like Ruby strength removal, and then you can maybe sing Under the Sea with it a little bit better. So I can see the angle where people are coming from with it, but maybe I think it's a bit of a win more card. But I need other Amber Emerald players in the comments to tell me that I'm just wrong. Tell me I'm wrong and I'll accept it, you know?
And then there's another kind of Mimi combo that I've been looking at in Amber Emerald, which is if you like flood the board, and then you play the tramp for cheap, and something that was flooding the board, maybe an Ursula Deceiver of all, sinks bibbidi babbidi boo into a Surfer Stitch twice, and then you draw 4 cards.
Yeah, I think you're memeing too much. I don't know what you're on. So the idea is you're going to play the tramp to guarantee that you should have another big 7-drop card. Bibbidi bobbidi boo.
I can cheat out my 7-drop that draws 2 cards.
Sure.
Sometimes.
I mean, I do like the idea of cheating out a big card and then replacing it with a bigger card. Like, sure, I like the idea of that. I like the kind of combo-ness. I don't think that's this deck, though, Moyen. I think that's a completely different deck.
It doesn't all fit into this deck, probably. Yeah. But, like, the discard package was so strong that I was looking at maybe you can merge the 2 ideas, but I doubt it will be the most consistent deck.
Yeah, because for me, I think... Like, I know a lot of people, when they look at this deck, look at this type of deck, they're like, oh, how do you close out the game? It's like, you're so all in on the discard package. If you don't, get your drawn and discard them and start to establish a board and then under the sea, like, you never win the game. But I think that's how this deck is supposed to be played. Like, I've seen people, like, I talked to Bennett and, like, he's tried, like, the Lilos as, like, this idea of, like, trying to close the game out a little bit faster with the Lilo. I think Lilo is probably the closest thing that it's okay because it's just coming back from the graveyard. But I don't think you want to be adding too many more stuff of like, oh, I just want high questers to like close the game out faster. No, like this deck does what it does to like win the game slowly. And I think if you're trying to speed that up, you're taking out consistent parts of the deck that make the deck what it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you're telling me I shouldn't put Chernabok and Christoph in there to close out the game?
You do whatever you want, Moyen. If you honestly, if you make like another version of Amber Emerald work that's not so discard focused. I know there's like the Chernadog decks running around at the moment. I haven't had a look at them too much, but I'm actually interested just in general for anyone that does play that type of Amber Emerald. What are your thoughts on the Hiram BANS and stuff? Because I know that was a deck some people were playing to try and like play into the Sapphire Steel, that they thought it was quite good into it. So how viable is that deck now? I guess it's probably fine.
Also, it was never good against good blue steel players.
Sure. Next slide. Oh no, that's it. We're done, right? That's all of the decks we have. So final thoughts on this kind of new emerging meta. There's some decks that we didn't include within that section. One is Amethyst Steel. For the most part, I think Amethyst Steel remains very much the same type of deck that it is now. Like, thoughts on that deck in comparison to with what these bans mean. Again, like I said, I didn't include it because I felt like it's fundamentally it's the same deck, right?
Yeah, I don't think it changes very much, and it's still kind of this middling deck that should do okay against most things, but not like excel at anything. I think Sapphire Steel, of course, we did. I mean, that's the one we didn't put up a version for, but I think it's for sure the one that got hit the most. It lost both Fortispheres, and which was very, very, very important at enabling the build Stormage on, but also the Flavasham. And I think you can still build some like maybe Cheater Quill versions or like Quill Whole New World versions that will do okay, but it's definitely, or I would expect it to have lost its place at the top of the meta for sure.
Yeah, you're telling me you're not well, I want to give a shout out to somebody because I know there's somebody that's been really impacted. Well, all Sapphire Steel players have been impacted, but I know Harlan Sweet has, he's been like Sapphire Steel through and through. So these bans have probably like really, really hit him hard. And I know he really likes the Kiwi Birds list and stuff. You were telling me, Moyen, like, you don't... Okay, I don't want to say that you don't respect the deck, right? That's maybe a little insulting, but... I
didn't say that either, so don't put words
I'm not
in my
putting...
mouth.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You haven't said that. You clearly haven't said that. But you said that, maybe you're not as high on the deck as others, and you think it's just more of a mid deck than kind of a top tier deck.
I think it's a deck that's quite easy to play and it's an okay deck, but I don't think it, like, I think at highest level of play I can't see it comparing favorably against the top decks of the meta, and I don't think it did in the previous set either or before the ban either. But it's a fine deck.
Sure. Anything else? Like, there's no color combinations you're gonna miss. I've seen some stuff on Twitter. This guy Chris Anderson, who honestly, I think I could be completely wrong. I think I followed him from like one of the tournaments he won back in the day on like one of Tia's tournaments. It might have been like he might have won on Red Blue or something, and I've been following him since. But he makes some of these like Amber Amethyst decks that they have like all of the normal Amethyst stuff in it, but they've got like Rapunzels, they've got like there's like 3-4 fairy godmothers in there. There's some like every time I look at those lists, I'm like, I don't really know what this is. This just looks like a mishmash of, because it's not aggro. It doesn't seem like straight up aggro either. You know what I mean? So there's these weird like Amber Amethyst decks that to be floating around. So I might have to take a look at that, and when I'm back on the podcast, discuss those soon as well.
My favorite deck, the Sardine Can Peter Pan lockout deck, is gone now. There's no deck to lock out of the game anymore.
Oh, there's no deck to stop. Okay, but you can still do that combo basically.
Yes, but like it doesn't work if my opponent plays evasives.
True.
Or board wipes. So like it only works if the meta would be
non-evasive
largely
stuff.
Sapphire Steel.
Yeah.
Without item removal. So I can't play it anymore.
Did you play it at all? Did you actually test that deck?
Not really. But in my head, I'm playing it every night.
I'm sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and with that, that's pretty much the end of the podcast. Like, I think that I think the following meta is going to be interesting leading up to set champs. I want some stuff to compete in. I don't want to sound like a broken record. We all want some stuff to compete in. We all want some news. I mean, we'll at least have the UK Games Expo event right coming up at the end of May, which will be fun. That'll be like the last. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Also, this weekend I'll be at the Cactus. I don't know if I managed to get a ticket last minute, but I'll be at the convention in Germany, in Leipzig, and then
is this the Battle Bear, like our Battle Bear involvedness?
Yeah, the Ostlor.
Yeah,
and then in 3 weeks there's the big event in Ravensburg that I'll be attending, and then at some point there's also the UK Games Expo. So those are like the medium to big size tournaments that are coming up, even if they're not DLC level.
Sure. Yep.
And also, I was supposed to play my winners bracket final yesterday evening against Atterbucks. And then the ban came out 1 hour before our match, and I was like, "Oh, what do we do now? What do we do in the tournament? Because we don't want to play in a format that's no longer really relevant if it's made for the viewer." So it was like, okay, I guess we have to change decks. But then it doesn't really make sense to keep players color locked or like ink locked into ink combinations that are no longer strong when they like that's not on the players. So
that would be funny though. I'm sorry, like that would be funny to just be like, no, Moyen, Archetype, you have to build a new Sapphire Steel.
Yeah,
get cooking. Yeah.
Archetype and me go to winners bracket final with the best deck, and then it's like, oh no, you have to keep playing this after the bans, and then we like lose. we both lose. None of us wins.
Yeah.
So I think we have like a week to figure out the meta and then submit a new ink combination in which we can change decks, if I understood correctly. So that is, even though there's nothing on the line, I care a lot about that event, and I have to figure out what ink combination I should play in that event. If you have any suggestions, let me know.
So yeah, with that, if you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the podcast, the number one thing you can do is leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. There's a video version of this available over on youtube.com/@PodcanaPodcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. Twitters are @Moyen_HS and @Kawatech_CG. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you guys next week.